the syndrome is that you have a bad guy settle in a remote or xenophobic population group in a remote area. There's some bleed out where there's a contagion effect where they attack the wider world. Then there's a response, and it's heavy-handed or alienating to the population, and people close ranks behind the extremists, even though they might not have liked the extremists, particularly before the outsiders turned up. That is precisely what we've seen in Pakistan. In 1947, when Pakistan was first established, Jinnah made a deal with the tribes, particularly in Waziristan, during the time of the Kashmir War, to the effect that if you sit down quietly and don't cause trouble and remain quiet under the Maliks and the political agents and the other sort of neo-colonial setup that we've got in place, and remain part of Pakistan nominally, then we'll just stay out of your affairs. And right from 1947 until 2002, the Pakistani army never went into the FATA, the federally administered tribal areas, on a war footing. So that basically the deal was sit down quietly under the local political agent, and if you don't, the army's going to come in and kick your ass. Okay, that was the implicit sanction behind that structure. In 2002, at our urging, the Pakistanis went into the Tira Valley. First time since the existence of Pakistan, they went in to actually fight their own people in the Tira Valley, and they lost. So they actually called their own bluff, right? And then the tribes were like, well, so much for that. You know, you said that if we didn't sit down quietly, army was going to come in and defeat us, and we just beat the army. So, you know, what's to worry about? And the tribes, within 2 or 3 years, were in a state of pretty much total uprising against the Pakistani army, which had been very alienating in the way it had carried out its operations. I went out with them on the ground a number of times in 2006 and was just appalled by the way they were treating the local population. Shelling villages. At one point, they were applying heavy collective punishment to any village which had had some kind of Taliban sighting nearby. There was one village which had started in Khyber Agency, which had started to become favourable to the government and think, oh, this is bad, we shouldn't be part of this, we'll join the sort of government side of the conflict. And so the Afghan Taliban just went and set up an ambush next to the village, unbeknownst to the villagers, ambushed the next army convoy that came along. Army just mortared the village and destroyed a bunch of houses and killed a bunch of civilians, and problem solved. You know, it was an enemy village again. So this has happened on a larger scale all through Pakistan. That's one problem. A second problem is that elements of the Pakistani military, and in particular the intelligence service, are actively or passively on the other side. A lot of the people that we were fighting in Afghanistan in 2007, 2008 were trained or supported by ISI and the army. The Mumbai attack on India last year was almost certainly sponsored by the military. The Indian embassy bombing in 2008, July 2008, which killed 50 people, was carried out by LET, which is a ISI-sponsored terrorist group, at ISI direction. The ISI director admitted that, not on the record, but you know, there's plenty of open source media reporting about that. So, you know, what I would say is the poor performance of the Pakistani military has probably passed the point at which you can explain it away by mere incompetence. There's a lot of incompetence there, but there's also mixed loyalties. And President Obama actually said this in his speech on the 27th of March. He said, Pakistani military has had mixed loyalties. The time of the blank check is over. And so right now there's legislation before Congress which is designed to impose benchmarks on Pakistani military performance and to impose a degree of conditionality on how they perform. Now, this is not against the Pakistani civilian government, okay? And I'm not trying to suggest that Pakistan is the enemy. What I'm saying is that the civil government, which is democratically elected and legitimate, doesn't control its own national security establishment, and some elements within that establishment are opposed to our interests. So what we need to be doing is identifying and working with our friends and building up their authority and helping them in Pakistan and trying to limit and weaken the power of our enemies, which is basically Baitul Masud and the TTP, a bunch of other insurgent groups, but also some elements within the military and the intelligence service. It's a complex picture in Pakistan, but it's not a pretty one. And I think the risk of Pakistan becoming a failed state is there and has to be thought about. And we should remember that if you took the population of Iraq and the population of Afghanistan and added them together, it's still around a third the population of Pakistan. Pakistan is 173 million people, more than 100 nuclear weapons, an army bigger than the US Army, and Osama bin Laden sitting right there in the 2/3 of the country that the government's lost control of. And that's a very dangerous environment.